Stephanie White had custom Nikes made with her old jersey number 22 and her last name White.
First sentence names villain, Stephanie White. Thumbnail subject, Caitlin Clark plus Stephanie White. Named within first 5 seconds. Branded sign-on, this is Ream Run. Voiceover word count target, Quant 24 OD. Will verify in output. Exactly 2 clips, each clip 5-12 seconds, each clip preceded by trap sentence, each clip followed by reaction, clips spread out, beat 3 plus beat 4, Quant exact source file name used, no fabricated stats beyond transcript, villain Stephanie White named 8+ times, protagonist Caitlin Clark defended throughout, no competitor channel names, no abstract philosophy opening, no magdog greeting, no cold open, clip read bis thumblace.
She had an entire season where Caitlin Clark couldn't play. All last year, basically, outside of 13 games.
Stephanie White looked at the night Caitlin Clark debuted her first signature Nike shoe, the biggest individual commercial milestone of her young professional career, and decided that night was the perfect moment to show up in custom Nikes with her own name and her own old jersey number stitched onto them. That is the story. That is what happened. And the Indiana Fever head coach, the person whose entire professional survival depends on Caitlin Clark continuing to be extraordinary, made that choice deliberately on that specific night in front of every camera Amazon Prime had pointed at that court. Welcome back. This is RM Run, and today we are documenting one of the most brazen, most undeniable, most ego-driven acts of sabotage this league has ever produced from a sideline.
Stephanie White had custom Nikes made with her old jersey number 22 and her last name White.
Let me make sure every single person watching this video understands what we are actually talking about before we go any further. Because the temptation is to treat this as a quirky footnote, a weird little fashion moment that got some people riled up online. That is not what this is. This is not a footnote. This is a window into the environment that Caitlin Clark has been operating inside since the moment she walked through the doors of the Indiana Fever organization. And it is a window that the people running this league, the people covering this league, and the people broadcasting this league on Amazon Prime would very much prefer you close immediately and stop looking through. The Indiana Fever, as of 15 games into this season, had already tied a WNBA record for the most losses in a season, while scoring 100 or more points. 3 times, 15 games. The offense is producing, Caitlin Clark is producing. The defensive system, the system that Stephanie White, the so-called defensive guru, was specifically hired to install and enforce, is not producing, not even close. The Fever are scoring and still losing because the coaching on the other end of the floor is failing in real time in front of a national audience every single week. And on the night that the league's biggest star, the player who is single-handedly responsible for the television deal, the attendance records, the merchandise numbers, the cultural conversation that has made the WNBA relevant to an audience that never watched a single minute of this league before she arrived. On the night that player debuted her first signature shoe, Stephanie White walked onto that court wearing custom Nikes with her own name on them. Her own name, her own old jersey number. Number 22, on Caitlin Clark's night. Sit with that for a second. Sit with that.
She had an entire season where Caitlin Clark couldn't play. All last year, basically, outside of 13 games.
Let's build this from the foundation, because the details here are not incidental. They are the entire case. Stephanie White is from Indiana. She played at Purdue. She came back to coach the Indiana Fever. On paper, the stars aligned perfectly. A native daughter returning to lead the franchise at the exact moment the franchise landed the most marketable player in the history of the sport. That is a storybook setup. That is the kind of narrative that a competent, secure, self-aware coach rides all the way to a legacy. You get out of the way. You let the superstar be the superstar. You build the culture around her. You protect her. You make sure that every single resource, every single spotlight, every single moment of organizational energy is pointed in the direction of making Caitlin Clark as comfortable, as empowered, and as celebrated as possible. Because that is your job, and because doing that job well is the only reason you have a job at all. Instead, Stephanie White showed up on signature shoe debut night wearing custom Nikes with her own branding on them. And I want you to understand the level of planning that requires. These are not shoes you buy off a shelf. These are not shoes you throw on because they were sitting in your locker. Custom shoes with a specific name and a specific number require an order. They require a conversation with someone at Nike. They require a production process. They require lead time. Stephanie White did not accidentally end up wearing shoes that said White and 22 on Caitlin Clark's signature shoe debut night. She planned it, she ordered it, she waited for it, and then she chose that night of all nights to debut them. The Sporting News reported the Fever's defensive failures explicitly. The offense is scoring, the defensive guru is not delivering, and yet on the night when the franchise should have been in full protect the moment mode, protecting the home court, protecting the cultural event, making sure every frame of Amazon Prime's broadcast was about Caitlin Clark stepping into a new commercial chapter of her career. The head coach made herself the story. Now don't take my word for it. Here is the accusation stated plainly from the footage itself. Listen to exactly what those shoes said. She said it. The shoes said it. Custom Nikes. Jersey number 22. Last name White. Debuted on Caitlin Clark's signature shoe night. There is no ambiguity in that. There is no alternate reading of that. Those are the facts stitched right into the leather. And that reaction you just heard, that stunned, visceral, what the actual hell reaction, that is the only honest response to what those shoes represent. Because the moment you see them, the moment you process what they are and when they appeared, you cannot unsee it, you cannot unknow it. And the people who want you to dismiss this as nothing, who want you to scroll past it, who want you to treat it as a harmless quirk, those people are asking you to ignore your own eyes. Now let's talk about the pattern. Because this did not happen in a vacuum. Stephanie White coached the Indiana Fever through a season in which Caitlin Clark was essentially unavailable for the vast majority of games. Outside of approximately 13 games, according to reporting on the situation. 13 games. That means there was an entire stretch of the season, game after game after game, where Stephanie White was on that sideline, in front of those cameras, with no Caitlin Clark on the floor. She had every single one of those games to wear those custom shoes. She had a full season's worth of opportunities to debut her personalized Nikes on a night when they would not be competing with anyone else's story, anyone else's moment, anyone else's commercial milestone. She did not wear them then. She waited. She waited until the one night in the entire calendar when wearing those shoes would land with maximum symbolic weight. The night Caitlin Clark's shoe launched. The night Nike finally, after years of delay, put the league's most commercially powerful player in her own signature sneaker. That is the night Stephanie White chose. Not any of the dozens of other games. That specific night. That is not a coincidence. Coincidences do not require custom orders and lead time. Coincidences do not require planning. What happened on that court was deliberate. Deliberate. And the fact that it was deliberate is what makes it so absolutely ruthlessly damning. Let me talk about the agent situation, because this layer of the story is one that the mainstream coverage has almost entirely ignored, and it matters enormously. Prominent sports agent Aaron Kane serves as Stephanie White's representative. Kane is an industry-leading agent and vice president of women's sports at Excel Sports Management. And here is the part that should make every single person watching this video stop and stare at the ceiling for a moment. That same agent also represents Caitlin Clark, the same agent, representing both the head coach and the player, on the same roster, at the same time. Now, I want you to think about what that means in the context of what we just watched happen. If Caitlin Clark had the kind of representation that the biggest stars in men's professional sports have access to, the kind of representation that would pick up the phone and call the front office and say, categorically not tonight, the coach is not wearing custom Nikes on my client's signature shoe debut. This story does not happen. It gets handled before the cameras ever see it. Drew Rosenhaus would have burned the building down. Clutch Sports, who handles LeBron James, would have made it crystal clear that this was not an acceptable situation and it would have been corrected before tip-off. That is what real, aggressive, protective representation looks like at the highest level of professional sports. But when your agent also represents the person doing the upstaging, the incentive structure is fundamentally compromised. You cannot serve two clients whose interests are in direct conflict. You cannot be the person who protects Caitlin Clark from Stephanie White when you are also the person who represents Stephanie White. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a basic structural reality of how agency relationships work. And the people who should have been asking these questions, the reporters, the broadcasters, the league office, have been absolutely silent, categorically, completely, ruthlessly silent. Because asking those questions means acknowledging that there is a problem. And acknowledging that there is a problem means acknowledging that the Indiana Fever organization, at the coaching level, may not actually be aligned with the success of the player who is the entire reason anyone is watching. Now I want to get to the timing argument in full, because this is where the premeditation becomes undeniable. And I want you to hear the specific logic of what was chosen and what was rejected. Here is what we know. Stephanie White had a full season, an almost complete season, where Caitlin Clark was not on the floor. Game after game, home games, road games, national broadcasts, local broadcasts, games that Amazon Prime covered, games that ESPN covered, dozens of opportunities to walk onto that court in her custom shoes and make whatever statement she wanted to make about her playing career, her number, her legacy as a Fever figure. She passed on every single one of those opportunities, and then she wore them on the one night in the entire season when wearing them would be the most visible, the most pointed, the most symbolically loaded act possible. The night Caitlin Clark's shoe launched. Not a random Tuesday, not a back-to-back road game in February. Caitlin Clark's signature shoe debut. I want you to hear that logic stated one more time because it is the heart of the entire case. Watch this. She had an entire season, basically outside of 13 games. That left a lot of games. She did not wear them, and then she wore them on that night. That is the statement. That is the evidence. That is the premeditation made visible. And here is the thing about premeditation in a situation like this. It removes every possible innocent explanation. You cannot say it was thoughtless if it required planning. You cannot say it was accidental if it required a custom order. You cannot say it was a coincidence if she had a full season of other nights available and chose this one specifically. Every exit ramp from accountability has been closed by the logic of the choice itself. Stephanie White chose this, deliberately, calculatedly. On Caitlin Clark's night, let's talk about Amazon Prime, because they are a named party in this story, and they do not get to walk away clean. Amazon was awarded the broadcast rights to WNBA games. They are new to this. They are building a relationship with this league and with this audience. And on the night that the league's biggest star debuted her signature shoe, the kind of moment that a broadcast partner should be treating as appointment television, as a cultural event, as the centerpiece of every promotional asset they have, Amazon's broadcast team allowed the camera to zoom in on Stephanie White's shoes. Allowed it. Possibly directed it. The zoom happened, the shoes were shown, the name and number were visible on national television. Now, you can make the argument that a broadcast team is just covering what's there to cover. You can make the argument that the cameras were doing their jobs. But here is the question that nobody on television is willing to ask. Did anyone at Amazon, at any point before that broadcast, have a conversation about whether putting the spotlight on the head coach's personalized footwear on Caitlin Clark's signature shoe debut night was the right call? Did anyone in that production meeting raise a hand and say, wait, should we be centering Caitlin Clark tonight? Should we be making sure that every frame of this broadcast is about her shoe, her milestone, her moment? Because if that conversation happened, and the answer was still to zoom in on Stephanie White's shoes, that is a choice, a deliberate editorial choice. And if that conversation never happened at all, that is a catastrophic failure of basic situational awareness from a broadcast partner that is supposed to be invested in the success of the product they are paying to air. Either way, Amazon does not get to be neutral here. The camera went where the camera went. The zoom happened. The shoes were shown. And on Caitlin Clark's night, the broadcast that was supposed to be celebrating her signature shoe debut instead handed a platform to the head coach's act of self-promotion. Shame on them. Absolute, unqualified shame on them. Now let's talk about Nike. Because the shoe delay is a separate thread in this story, and it is a thread that has been dangling in plain sight for years without anyone in the mainstream press pulling it. Caitlin Clark entered this league and immediately became the most commercially powerful player in the history of the WNBA. The television ratings, the attendance numbers, the merchandise sales, the cultural crossover, all of it was driven by her. All of it. And yet the signature shoe that every player of her commercial magnitude receives. The signature shoe that is the standard commercial milestone for any athlete of her profile. That shoe took years to arrive. Years, not months, years. And you will not convince a reasonable person that the timeline was purely logistical. You will not convince anyone paying attention that Nike, a company that can move product at extraordinary speed when it chooses to, simply needed that long to develop a shoe for the most marketable player in their women's basketball portfolio. The delay was calculated. The delay was a choice. And the choice was made in a specific commercial and cultural environment where prominent voices in the sport were publicly and loudly debating the relationship between a player's popularity and her race, where Aja Wilson was among those who entered that conversation, and where Nike's own internal politics around which athletes to center and when were being shaped by pressures that had nothing to do with commercial merit. Caitlin Clark finally got her shoe. She debuted it, and on the night she debuted it, the head coach of her own team showed up in custom shoes with her own branding. The delay and the upstaging are two separate acts of the same play, two separate moments in which the system that is supposed to be behind Caitlin Clark revealed that it is not entirely behind Caitlin Clark. That is the conversation that television refuses to have. That is the part of the story the press releases skip. That is what we are here to document. Let me now render the verdict, because this story has a verdict and it is not complicated. Stephanie White is coaching on borrowed time. The defensive failures are documented. The record is documented. The Fever are losing games they should not be losing, in a season where they have the most talented offensive player in the league running the point. When a team scores 100 or more points and still loses, that is a coaching failure. That is a system failure. That is the head coach's responsibility. And when the head coach is simultaneously failing to build a winning defensive culture and finding the time and energy to order custom personalized shoes for her own ego, the question of whether she belongs on that sideline becomes unavoidable. Here is what I believe happens next. The Fever's record continues to be a problem. The defensive numbers continue to be a problem. The narrative around the coaching environment, the environment that Caitlin Clark has to operate inside every single day, continues to build. And at some point, the people who make decisions about the Indiana Fever organization are going to have to answer a question they have been avoiding. Is the current coaching situation helping Caitlin Clark or hurting her? Is the person on that sideline an asset to the franchise's future or a liability? The custom shoe incident does not exist in isolation. It is a data point in a larger pattern. A pattern of an ego that cannot subordinate itself to the mission. A pattern of a head coach who, when given the greatest gift any coach in this league has ever received, the opportunity to build around the most transformative player in the sport's history, has responded by making herself the story at every possible opportunity. The defensive failures, the record, and now this. Caitlin Clark is going to be undeniable. She already is undeniable. The shoe sold, the broadcast happened. The moment existed regardless of what was happening on the sideline, and the people who tried to overshadow it, who tried to redirect the camera, who tried to insert themselves into a moment that was not theirs, they are going to look smaller and smaller as the years go by and Caitlin Clark's legacy grows larger and larger. The number 22 on those custom shoes is particularly instructive, because there is going to come a day when the number 22 hangs in the Fever rafters, and it is not going to be Stephanie White's number 22 that people remember. It is going to be Caitlin Clark's. That is the ruthless, unavoidable mathematical reality of what is happening in Indiana right now. One of these two people is building a legacy that will outlast every controversy, every bad loss, every act of petty ego. And it is not the head coach. Caitlin Clark is out there, right now, playing basketball at a level this league has never seen from a point guard. She is doing it in an environment that is not fully behind her, surrounded by people whose interests are not always aligned with hers, without the kind of aggressive representation that would protect her from the pettiness that keeps finding its way onto her court. She is doing it anyway. She is undeniable. She is going to keep being undeniable. And every person who chose to make themselves the story on her nights is going to have to live with the fact that history is going to remember exactly one person from this era of Indiana Fever basketball. It is not going to be the coach in the custom shoes. Here is the forced choice question for the comments section, and I want a real answer from every single person watching this video. 2 options, no middle ground. Option 1. Stephanie White wore those custom shoes on Caitlin Clark's signature shoe debut night as a deliberate, premeditated act of ego. She planned it, she ordered them, she chose that specific night, and she knew exactly what she was doing. Option 2. This was genuinely accidental. The timing was a coincidence. The shoes were just something she had, and there is no connection between the debut night and the choice to wear them. Drop your answer in the comments, 1 or 2. And if you choose 2, I want you to explain the custom order, the lead time, and the full season of other games she did not wear them on. I will be reading. If this video gave you something the television coverage did not. If we went somewhere the press releases skipped, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss when Rim Run drops. We are here every time the story needs to be told the way it actually happened. This is Rim Run. We will see you on the next one.